Hey, Larry.
What?
We're recording this meeting. I wanted to ask, I see that Patricia's here. This is the finance meeting. Is anyone else, or why didn't anyone else from the financial department attend this meeting, or are they planning, or did you invite them?
I didn't invite anybody, it's not my meeting.
Okay, who's in the finance committee? Did you guys invite the financial representatives of this district to this meeting? I know, but normally Tina and all those other people attend, correct? Will they be,
Sometimes.
will they be attending today?
I don't know.
You don't know?
No.
Did you specifically invite them to this very critical
I
meeting?
never specifically invited them.
Andy, did you? Russ, did you? Really? Did you see the value of inviting them to your meeting?
All set for him to come on.
They typically come on their own. If they don't, someone will be in their place.
Okay, we'll see if they attend.
So, February. I didn't know.
I know.
Excuse me, Larry, you presiding over this financial? Who's going to preside over the financial committee meeting?
Whoever the chair of the finance committee is.
Who would that be? Andy? Andy, okay. Are you going to wait until Tina or any of the other people from the finance department arrive, or are we going to proceed without them?
It's past 6 o'clock meeting time, so we will begin.
Were they,
We have roll call, please.
yeah, were they invited?
Yes.
It's a public meeting, you know.
I understand, but no, were they specifically invited to say, we'd like you here? Would be a benefit to our board or benefit to our finance committee to have them attend?
It's not a mandatory meeting for
I
them.
agree, but there's a value to it. They usually are at these meetings. Were they specifically told not to be here?
No.
Okay.
Roll call, please.
Andrew Genser,
Present.
Richard Phelps, Rita Spinelli, here. Patricia Denafilla, here. Tina Chan, Jonathan Faber.
Any courtesy before roll? I'll turn it over to you, Mr. Denafilla.
Excuse me, how would they have done courtesy of the floor if there's no forms?
Can we please go through the finance?
I understand, but he just asked if there's courtesy of the floor, there's no forms.
Right now, we're going through the finance meeting. When we have open discussion, we'll see if
But-
there's any discussion.
Did you just say courtesy of the floor?
I did ask courtesy.
Yeah, so shouldn't we just ask the people since there was
But
no
it's-
forms if they have one?
But again, it's not a formal board meeting with an open discussion courtesy of the
He
floor.
ran the meeting and he offered it. In fairness, if they had a right, they could have filled one out. If they can't, you should just ask them if they wanted to speak, right? I think it's a good
Is there
idea.
anyone who'd like to speak as public forum? Okay,
Thank you for providing the courtesy.
This is the 2019-20 budget discussion, and I'd just like to provide an overview of the current budget status. The 2019-20 budget for personnel costs, that would be salaries and benefits, was built based upon the currently in place collectively bargained agreements. The budget includes $30 million for personnel costs, of which $16.6 million is related to salaries, $7 million is due to PSERS and employer taxes, and $6.4 million is due to employee benefits. The remaining 2019-20 budget for non-personnel related costs was built upon the current year-to-date expenditures and most recent 3-year average, 15-16, 16-17, and 17-18. The budget includes $15 million for non-personnel related costs. Included within the $15 million non-personnel related cost is $1.5 million for mandated charter school costs, $1.73 million in support of CCTI, $234,000 in support of LTRC, $20,000 in support of the Lehighton Memorial Library, $2.6 million in special education costs from the IU and other entities, $3.7 million for bond payments, and $5.13 million for other expenditures, which includes supplies, book, technologies, repairs, occupancy costs, and any other costs the district has to incur. So that gives you a broad overview of where the budget stands, what things the district has control over versus those things that we don't have control over. The mandated charter school costs, our collective bargaining agreements are currently actively in place. The budget was built upon all of those items that have been put in place.
Excuse me, just to clarify, you mentioned it was $3.7 million for the bond payments?
Yes, Mr. Bradley.
And then what was the amount for supplies?
5.13 million would be everything else. Supplies, books, technology, fuel, electricity, water, sewage.
And of the $3.7 million in bond payments, how much of that is interest?
Interest is 1.9 million.
Thank you.
Of the district. So throughout from July through, I believe it was October, November, December, on all of those board reports, the healthcare costs were not shown. The payments were made to the carriers, because if you don't make the payments, the benefits will be shut off. The payments were made to the carriers, however, it wasn't shown in the expenditures of the district. So within, I believe it was the March statements, you'll see a lump sum adjustment to record what was paid throughout the 18-19 year, that as of that point had not been shown in the expenditures.
And when does those expenditures normally get accredited to a budget report?
They would be debited to an expenditure, something within.
Monthly?
Yes.
And whose responsibility inside of your office is to debit the expenditure to the budget?
I was not here when the former business administrator was here. I don't know how he handled that. I believe it was the benefits department that would do that allocation.
So the benefits department would be the accountant in charge of accountant and benefits that reports to Tina Champ. That would be Melanie Windley.
Yes.
Okay, and then Tina, who's the assistant business manager, I'm under the impression she provides the bank reconciliation reports and the board audit work and the monthly treasurer's reports. So, and also the bank account reconciliations. So she would then have had direct access to Melanie's information. And then she reports back to Brian and the buck stops with Brian. Is that correct?
That would be correct.
Except for the fact I made a mistake, I'm sorry. The buck really stops with the board overseeing Brian because he's one of our subordinates as a board of directors, correct?
Correct.
Okay, more correct, I'll say, right? So how was it that this occurrence took place in this short period of time prior to your employment, but never before in the life of Brian's tenure here?
I can't speak to that. I was not here. I can only speak to the fact that when I came here, I was receiving items to approve for payment that were not being coded to an expense account, which I then immediately questioned, and then digging into it further, was told that throughout the year, they were not charged to expense. Checks were issued, but the expenditure was not reflected within the expenditure statements.
So what would if they're coded to an expense account, what would the coded expense account number look like? A series of 15 or 20 digits?
It would.
Okay. Money as a result of insurance, is that correct? Claims?
The district's claims were at a higher level than what the budget was anticipated.
And we self-insure the
Yes.
district, right? So how does Highmark come into play? If we're self-insuring, what does Highmark do?
they handle the administrative respect of the claims, meaning they process the claims on our behalf and we pay them a fee for that.
And we have a broker that sets up that per head for Highmark, correct? And that broker was BHA? No, I'm sorry, not BSI, that's the new one. Who was ETA maybe? Was it ETA?
I wasn't here then, I believe it was ETA.
Do you know who it was, Andy?
ETA.
ETA? Okay, great, thank you. So who's in charge of ETA? Who's our contact for ETA?
Again, it would have been a contact through the business office.
All right, but Rita, do you know who the contact is?
I know that Joe Pilla is.
He's ETA? Okay, great.
Mhm.
And then, have you ever talked to Joe?
No,
Have you ever talked to Joe yet? Who else is finance would be, you never talked to Joe? Did anyone talk to Joe about this situation? That our claims are,
In all due respect to Mr. Pilla, he didn't set the budget, the business.
I understand that, but apparently somebody set a budget. That he would be involved in helping us understand what our claims were before and what they anticipated to be. They helped with the consortium to get away from the consortium, so because our claims were so low and our rating was so low, he was instrumental in saving this district. The first year we did that was $500,000, and the second year we saved about $250,000. So his input would be valuable to me as a board member. Would it be valuable to you if you had some of his insight?
I guess my question.
I'm sorry, I
sorry.
apologize,
No,
yeah.
it's fine.
I was asking the finance committee who's in charge and responsible for this budget item and the resulting shortfall that occurred over an entire year without discovery until last month.
There are a number of other items beyond benefits.
I respect that, but I'm asking the finance committee, the Rita and Andy and Richard, did they contact Joe when we saw the expenses, the liability that was not recorded as an expenditure exceeding the budget by millions of dollars? Did you contact
You're
them?
mixing a couple different things.
No, I'm very simple. Let me try to answer again.
Let
I'll
me ask
tell
this,
you what to
did
find.
you spent so much time in Brian's office, did you?
Did I do what, Rita?
Did you contact Joe about the discrepancies?
Yes, I did, actually. Thank you for asking.
When?
And when I found out about it,
When?
recently.
Okay, so all those months that you went and looked over all those bills, personally, took pictures of them, photographed them, videotaped them, you never saw anything different, except when it was brought to your attention by Ms. Denicola.
Correct, because I don't think we really have the problem you perceive it to be. And I'd like to find that out. And I love that you're surprised, and I think it's great. So let's get a fact. I invited Joe here. Is Joe here? There you go. Hi, Joe.
Can I say something?
Yeah, I'd love for you to join in. Thank you.
I mean, this is a public meeting, but my firm handles servicing, and I mentioned this to Mr. Bradley. We do all the servicing to employees. I don't, like Mr. Cleaver said, I don't set budgets. There's some other gentlemen here that handle stop loss, and you know, we're not affiliated, but we kind of work together on managing the district program. And Gene and I deal with employees, employee issues, retirees, set meetings with Highmark. If the business office or Brian asked us to be involved in helping with budgets and analysis like that, he would ask us at the time, but he didn't. And I know Tim and Dave are more involved in the financing side of things, and maybe they could speak to that. But I just want to make sure that I'm a private business owner in Carbon County, and born and raised in this community, along with Gene. You know, we want to continue to just do the servicing for the district. And I know there's changes that are coming up, but we just want to continue to do the servicing. And I felt we were kind of left a little short with the RFP process.
So, okay, so let's make sure we hear it. Just focus on the benefits. Tell me again what you said. I'm a fifth grader.
What I'm saying is, the budget that was approved had $11.5 million budgeted in the 200 code for benefits. This was presented last Monday. You have it on your presentation that was given on Monday. Year to date, there was 14.9 million that was spent in that area. Other areas also.
Well, we'll stick to the 200, right? So of the $14.9 million that was consumed, spent, versus what we thought we were going to use at the beginning of the year, which was 11.5, we were budgeting 11.5, and the district consumed 14.9. Am I correct in that statement?
That is what we currently today have paid out under the 200 cat benefits for everything. That's everything.
I agree. So we had budget 11.5, and we put together expenditures that equal 14.9.
That is all benefits, everything.
That's healthcare, dental, PSERS, FICA, it's all
Everything.
benefits.
It's
Right.
not just health.
And we got the 11.5 million that we had a budget for, and then somewhere along the line, if we're gonna have a higher budget, a higher amount than what we're supposed to be spending, the first dollar over 11.5 million, and please make sure I read this right. That unless there are sufficient funds in the treasury of a district to pay the same, meaning an individual budget amount, a separate order shall be drawn for each account or payment. This is School Code 607. So how did we spend on these expenditure reports, or I'm sorry, these check reports, more than 11.5 prior to knowing about it? How did this board,
That's the question.
I understand, but the question I'm gonna ask
Question
again,
is, did
according
any of the
to-
reports show us at 100% consumption of our benefit budget?
yeah?
When?
So my question is.
No, when? I asked you, any of our budget summary reports ever show us at 100% or nearing 100% of our budgetary consumption for benefits?
Absolutely not.
Absolutely not, it didn't.
So my question again,
So my question would be, how would we know if we wouldn't see it on the budget summary reports?
well, the budget summary report, if I'm not mistaken, do have the expenditures, but they're just classified as a liability. Am I correct?
Classified as a liability, David, would not be on an expenditure report.
Correct. So this board saw these things, including myself, yeah, and I recognize them as within budget. So the question becomes, the statement is,
I'm trying to figure out what you recognize as within budget.
right, so my understanding is 11.5 million. So what I'd like to ask is twofold. One is, how do you spend $3.4 million, right? More than you budgeted without an alarm being raised. And before you answer that question, let's make sure we understand that our old business manager, let me finish, our old business manager, Mr. Brian Fike, had this understanding of transparency that was wonderful, and I respect him greatly. I think he did a fantastic job. And the reason I can say that is because he was the most trustworthy guy in this district, and I'll say it more than once. The reason I feel that he's the most trustworthy guy is because he allowed me, or anybody, to trust him and then verify what he did. So if we trust and verify, we can add to that trust. We'll never stop verifying. I mean, even the simplest clerk in a store is going to hand over their cash drawer to the next person. We'll trust them and verify that they add up the same amount to make sure they're even. And as soon as there's a discrepancy, a manager, a board, a person will come in and check those responsibilities. So if you're trying to make the suggestion that Brian allowed something to go over budget by $3.4 million, I find that hard to believe, so therefore I'd like to trust, but verify, our new business manager and this board to find out where the $3.4 million came from
I'm hearing you that it's not all healthcare, but the one thing I do want to alert everyone to, and I understand.
Can you introduce yourself again?
Tim Sears. I was involved in looking at the Benetcon arrangement for several years, and did a study of whether the school district was winning or losing inside the Benetcon consortium. And in fact, for, I don't know, a period of 4 years, they were a loser in the consortium because they had better risks.
And it just so happens that there's a couple months involved here between April and July. Typically when that happens, the newly appointed broker takes over servicing, doesn't get compensated for that first month or two. And that's not necessarily unstandard.
But you'd get the copies of that information.
And once that happens, once that broker of record is put into place, which Vista was sent that broker of record, they don't talk to the incumbent broker anymore, the losing broker, which was us.
I agree.
So all of a sudden, we have no access to any information at all as of April 1st, and BSI, if they were the winning broker, they would take over from that point forward and start to get compensated on anything going forward after July.
But the district would be paying only, you would be getting the fees.
The
to
fees would
you.
still come to us, because as I said just a minute ago,
But they come from Companion.
they're coming from the insurance, from Companion, not from the district. We were being paid a commission, not a per head fee.
But then is the information or the data sent to you transparently so that you can make an evaluation?
No.
I think you're aware of this.
The data would go from Highmark to the carrier. The
Not-
data
not-
would go to them.
With BSI, managing, Highmark to make sure that they process and pay the claims, and managing Companion as well, making sure that everything's being done.
Is there a BSI representative here?
I was unaware that it was an insurance meeting. Had I known, it would have
It's
been.
budget, and this is a big part of our budget. So the question I'm asking is if the budget changed from 11.5 is what we proposed that we were gonna be spending, and now you're spending 14.9 as an actual, and then you're gonna use that number moving forward, right? That we should find out where the shortfall is, and if as of April 1st, there wasn't any indication of it, my documents show no indication of it, the reports to the board show no indication, but yet you found it, we'd like to know what you found and where it was found.
I think that was part of our presentation last time.
It was, but there were specifics done, so something, somehow, a claim, something occurred equal to $3.4 million. And it had to be after April 1st, and it shows up on our reports of everything that we're doing. I've been only able to collect the transparent information from Brian, who I trust and verify, but we've not been able to get the information since then. So the question is, what occurred between April and now that equals $3.4 million that we're claiming, and this is the biggest part, claiming to be a shortfall?
Dave, we're gonna leave. Thank you, everybody, for the last 2 years. If I can just make one recommendation, and I would strongly advise that you do this, from what I'm hearing, and then, for whatever it's worth, if I were you, I would probably reach out to Brian Fike and have a conversation with Brian Fike and ask him to get involved in what went on here.
I did. Thank you for suggesting.
Thanks for the invite.
Did anybody ask Brian besides myself? Larry, did you call him up?
No.
You didn't?
No, I did not.
Just blind trust here. We didn't have any verification. Nobody called up Brian. Nobody? Besides myself? Blind trust.
We go along right back to Philip.
Thank you for coming.
You're welcome. Thank you.
So according to school code, hold on a second, I'll just get to something. According to school code, the report and direction, information to directors for tax levy or budget, must be provided to every school director. Furnish the incoming board, which would be us, school directors, all necessary information and such detailed statements that may be needed to provide for an annual tax levy or prepare for the annual estimate of expenditures, which is what you're trying to do. And at the same time, the reporting is under 613, and the illegal use is under 610, and the individual liability is under 608, and the right to not exceed a budget line item is a 609, and our insurance is covered under section 513. This information has not been provided to your board transparently, and in a lackadaisical manner, I want to make the statement very simply that even though we collect this data without a cooperative, subordinate administration, this board rubber stamps information without even having access to it. They don't even know. And when they're done doing that, it's those taxpayers that end up having to pay the fee. So I look at this as just a financial shuffle. Because unless you're telling me that this district went out and spent money it didn't have, which would be irresponsible and immoral, that we should not be in this position. Secondly, I'll make the statement that when you do a budget, instead of looking at last year's numbers and like you just did, wagged an extra couple $100,000 on top because everything goes up, you go the other direction, Mr. Cleaver. When you generate a budget, and I'll ask my board if they did it this way, you take the look at the income you're projected and then put some aside for rainy day savings, and then look at the 90 or 95% of what you're projected and say, how am I going to consume these dollars for those students when I take it from these citizens? Because that's what you're doing. Anything more than what's lawfully required by Pennsylvania school code would be giving away charity benefits to individual members of this community. And rather than giving away a charity benefit, it's not ours to give. So we have a responsibility to look at the actual budget based upon what we perceive to be spent from what we collect. So if you're going to take find in the minutes, I can't find anywhere where the board approved to move this money that we wrote these checks for outside of your budget. And if that's the case, we don't have the transparency from you as our minister and you as our business manager. And I don't think you have the information to even form this budget other than this WAG idea that you take last year's numbers and you add to it, which is totally irresponsible as a board of directors.
Those are actual expenses. Those are actually what we spend on an average year to year, going back and looking 2 and 3 years.
And it's our responsibility as a board, a business person, a manager of this district, to not just look at the mistakes that occurred in years past and then repeat them moving forward, but recognize that this board has been on a path of overconsumption, overtaxation, overborrowing for nearly a decade, and nobody put the checks and balances back in the system. And it's our job to do that now. And if you're going to put these checks and balances back in the system so you don't have furloughs and you don't have reduction in benefits, we should look at what money we have coming in and decide how we want to spend it based upon the Pennsylvania school code that says you are required to spend it here. As you mentioned, there's certain mandates associated with this policy. If not, this district is spending more than it has, and it has two choices. Take it from them, or fail and let the state come in and make the adjustments that they need. Now, I checked the Auditor General reports to other districts that are in this predicament, and a good portion of it is because of the morality of a school board that chooses to spend more than they have on items that are not needed by school code. We need to stop that practice. The decades of the past boards doing that exact practice is why we're in this predicament. And until we correct that morality, you're going to be in a shortfall. And you're looking at consuming all of your fund balance in one swipe over to benefits. Can I get a show of hands of how many people believe that we should only spend what we take in and not a penny more? right? So then why would you have a budget that shows a shortfall of $3.8 million?
It's a proposed budget, and that's the actual expenses from last year, Mr. Bradley.
Why would you
Why
propose?
didn't we have a proposed budget in January that showed $230,000 being used from the general fund? Why did we have that if these numbers were in line? I don't believe our numbers must have been in line for a January proposal either.
Rather than running the bus over Brian Fike,
I'm not
no
running
one.
the bus. Did I say any name?
I
I'm not
did.
running
I
any
did.
bus. You did.
I did.
Right.
Because
So
in the
you're
paper.
inferring that that's not
Hold
my
on.
take. I'm trying to figure out how we get out of it, not, and I understand you want to do your revisionist, so we don't go down a road of whatever, which is fine. But we don't have to go down it for 40 minutes because we heard it last week as well. We got to try to figure out how we're going to get out of here,
The
not
first
how we
step.
got in.
Right, the
And
first
we
step
know how
though
we
is.
got in it because we got some things that showed up differently.
Actually not. I think that what you have is
So
this
you're-
inability.
So you have your CPA and you have business administrator knowledge and you have all of this wrapped up with your experience level with your business? Is that why you think that things aren't going right? Or what is your interpretation of how we got here? Is your interpretation that somebody's not doing something correctly, that there's covert operations? What is it? You might as well get it out.
Okay, thank you. So as a business owner, it's my responsibility to hire CPAs, to hire insurance providers, to hire subcontractors, and the buck stops with me. As a board, a government,
Okay,
let me finish. As a board,
Move along, please.
as a government, we have administrators that we hire, that we have our direct contract with. We have a business manager that we have a direct contract with. She works for us, not him. She works for us.
but you figured out,
I
I
will.
understand that.
She works for us.
You can
This
say
board,
she without pointing at her, we all know
it's
who she
okay,
is.
out of respect. The idea is that this board is where the buck stops. So when we had a projected budget that was a shortfall for the next 4 years moving forward, and to be honest with you, for the last couple of years
We had a
before,
projected budget in January of $200,000,
Shortfall.
which that gap was gonna be closed.
and one more time, it was a shortfall. You should never project for a shortfall. But the reality is, when you did do that, it was immoral. In my opinion, it was immoral, and I brought it up multiple times. And the fact that next year's and the next year's and the next year's were all at a negative, I considered that immoral. My personal opinion, 1 of 9. When you're a board, and in January, like you said, your projected shortfall was only $200,000, whereas that is immoral, it is grossly immoral to now be $3.4 million, which shows me that the board, this board, did not do its job of holding this business accountable and our subcontractors accountable for those people that we answer to, because we work for them.
I kind of agree that this is a surprise, that.
It shouldn't be a surprise.
No, it shouldn't be. I kind of agree that when someone new came in, we found that things were different.
Thank you. So the first thing that I
And
would
I'm not
do,
throwing anyone under the
I won't-
bus.
I won't.
Because
So-
that's what you want.
I
We
don't
gotta
want to
figure
throw
out
you.
how to get out of it.
I understand that. So the first way you
We
figure
didn't need an insurance lesson tonight either.
Can I please finish my sentence, Larry? Can I? The first thing you do when you find out that the person you used to have hired and the person
Back
you...
to calling him. We can't.
One more time. The first thing you do when you have the person that used to do this responsible for your business and the new person that's doing this job for your business is to have them communicate. And the second thing you do is you oversee that communication to make sure it happens. So I did meet with Mr. Brian Fike, and I reviewed the information that was published in the paper, that the way that he did things was not the way other people would do them. And prior to just assuming, trusting, and not verifying the way that Patty did it, I went through the records to prove that what he did was accurate. So now my question is only here to trust Patty, but I'd like her to verify where's this discrepancy. And that's my only question. I do trust you. I'd like you to verify it. And since you work for this board, can you verify where that $3.8 million has been consumed.
I mean, again, we're sitting here, first of all, the $3.8 million.
It's a question, can we do that or not? It's a trust and verify.
Is,
Why can't it be verified?
because this is the
We
issue.
should run an account detail of every single account code on our revenue and expenses. I can show you exactly how much has been spent in each and every 900 line item account and how much was budgeted for that line item. I would be happy to print that for you and share it with you.
And between when you were hired now until now, this board has not been given that information, correct?
The board has continued to receive all the information that they got in the past.
Right, but we don't have the information you're offering now.
No, I'm offering it to you now.
I agree, but we haven't received it before that.
You are absolutely correct.
Excellent. So transparency is the answer to your current existing problem. But without that transparency, you're sitting here,
Well, exactly, we're sitting here because somewhere along the line, there was a miscalculation. That's why we're sitting here.
actually, I believe there was an immoral responsibility by a board to say two things. One is you projected to spend more than you had, first in morality, and the second is you kept spending it after the bank was empty when school code says you're not allowed to do that.
How do we
And those
know
two-
we're not supposed to do something if someone didn't alert us to that it's happening?
It's, I really wish you could understand this.
No,
It's
I wish you
our
could understand it. If you don't get
transparency
the, how come you
is-
didn't see that you overspent on that account?
Because
none of us got it in our budget summaries, Mr. Bradley. And that's supposed
It's
to
actually
be
in the budget
gospel of
summary.
how your
It's in the budget summary, I'm sorry, it's in the budget summary, right here. It tells you the benefits, it
You know,
tells
it's
you what you
gonna
have.
be either.
It's in your budget summary, you're not over budget.
It's fine. Okay, everything's great then, then why are we having a meeting?
Thank you, and that's what we're here to answer. The question is, it's in our budget summary, it was not listed, it is proved that we did pay certain amounts, not that much, so where is this missing money, Mr. Stern? And the only way to answer it is to stop rubber stamping this administration and get the facts first. Process. And then the second part of that was to bring the top selectors, top whatever tier back for an in-depth interview. Why was that part skipped?
We talked about this before a couple times and the answer hasn't changed yet.
Okay,
Not to me.
all right. So how are they connected to you, Mr. Yenser, those two people? Do you know them any way other than through relationships here?
Who's that?
Is Kelly Sheptock or Mr. Sheptock?
I do not know Kelly Sheptock.
Okay. Do you know her dad? You don't think you do, or possible? Possibly or probably? Two different words.
Who's her father?
Okay. Do you know Mr. Cleveland?
Do I know them?
Yeah.
Yeah, I know
You know her dad?
They work with districts that we've worked with before.
Sure. And you know their dad, right?
I know lots of them, yes.
Okay. Who is in charge of all the contracts with the district?
Who's in charge of?
Yeah, who's in charge of all the contracts with the
Who
district?
holds the contracts?
Yeah,
It's a business office.
okay. What does school code say about it?
I know it's a loaded question, so just do it.
No, I want to ask,
No,
because,
just do it.
okay,
I
the
don't know
board,
the school
sir.
code. I didn't look it
You
up
are.
because I didn't set anybody up on the school code question, so
I know.
why don't you enlighten us?
It's the board, Mr. Stern, from your, how many years of
I didn't say
experience
who
do you have on
held-
this board?
I said, you didn't say who holds them.
Now,
I
who's in
said
charge
who's in
of the
charge.
contract?
We approve them, the business office then holds them.
Okay, and who's in charge of them, is my question. Who is in charge of all contracts with the district?
Board approves contracts.
Right, the board is in charge of all of them.
Okay?
So if we are $3.4 million over budget on a item, it's our contract with Tim that just left and the other guy.
Mr. Bradley, we are not $3.4 million on one budget, please. It's ridiculous. I mean, we City and Phoenix say the same thing.
You're saying that it was moved from an expenditure, or not, from a liability to an expenditure.
I'd like to make a statement. Patty, I'd like to compliment you on your professionalism. And I'm going to end this with a question. But part of the benefit of the back and forth a multitude of times is that I think I understand the essence of the issue. In January, we had a report that reflected a $230-some thousand deficit. And now that deficit is significantly more. My question to you is, if you didn't discover this whenever you started working here in March, when would this have manifested itself? When would this have come out?
It would have come out in the audit when you were closing out your books for June 30th.
And the other point that I'd like to make, I understand the significance of where we are, but I'd like to also point out the significance of where we were. Like looking back 8 years ago or so, when we had a positive fund balance of 13.2 or whatever it was, we had roughly $50 or $52 million of identified need. And all those pieces have been pretty significantly addressed. So while I'm not trying to minimize this issue, comparatively, in my opinion, as compared with 8 years ago, we're in light year better shape. So we need to collectively try to figure out how we don't let this occur again, for one. And secondly, how we get a rope around fixing it.
Mr. Finnegan, when you were on the board back then, you said there was a $52 million shortfall. What was the budget surplus? He just said $52 million worth of needs. We'll use the word needs, that's fine. What was the budget excess at the end of those financial years? Because when I read them in the bond report, we showed we had a budget surplus. In some cases, almost $3.7 million on one, $2 million on the next year. So when you guys had the budget, how were you able to have a surplus?
That wasn't my understanding. My recollection was the reason largely that we had a $13.2 million positive trust fund balance is that we hadn't reasonably spent a nickel in 19 years. There were significant identified needs that we just, for whatever reason, were reluctant to
Kick down the road, as I think Mr. Kraus had said in the past, right? Before they were handed to you, someone kicked them down the road.
So again, I'd like to just reinforce my comment so that it's not misunderstood.
Sure.
I'm not minimizing this issue. I think Patty is doing, from what I can see and hear, a good job of identifying this particular problem. And that the issue that we collectively have to work on is, how do we address this and how do we make sure that it never occurs again?
But to your answer, the $52.5 million need.
And Mr. Bradley, that's just a casual recollection that goes back.
You're correct. It was in the feasibility study. It's not to be casual. It was physically documented and written down. Of the $52.5 million need that this district had,
and please don't quote me on.
We don't have to.
Don't quote me on that figure.
That's fine.
But the need was significant.
50 something.
We were actually confused by that trust fund balance.
It was amazing. And then the reality is, this district chose to have and incur for that need upon the backs of those individuals $100 million liability.
That's not so.
That is true.
No.
Yes, sir. We have that on the report. I can give it to you if you'd like.
What this board did, Mr. Bradley, was to positively affect this community for years to come.
But it spent our children's future doing it.
I don't believe so. I think what we did versus some other districts, and I'll name one, like Panther Valley.
How about Tamako?
I think we protected our tax base. With the advent of that hospital and the attractiveness of putting our kids into these schools, they're going to come here. Franklin's going to explode with professional people that will add to our tax base.
But what about why are we having so many kids move to charter schools? And to the fact that our district is now considering to creating their own.
That takes a smarter mind than mine.
Mr. Bradley, for someone who understands everything, we've had this law here for 4 or 5 years. So we're not creating our own.
Okay.
6 years?
Yeah.
I think the past boards were completely financially devoid of their responsibility. They overtaxed the community. The seniors moved out of the area. The tax base was abused by the decisions of this board. And the ability to have $13 million of cash in a fund balance and schools that had safety issues for our children that were not taken care of was a mistake. Thank you.
But again, Mr. Brownlee, in my recollection, that was not from overtaxing. That was from an inability to make decisions to improve.
Anytime you take in more money than you consume, it's an overtaxation. You should have given it back rather than leaving it in a fund, sitting in cash, to not repair the schools. And there was a feasibility study, and I don't know exactly when you were on the board, but there was a feasibility study done in 2011, and then the same study was done by the same organization, so there's no discrepancy in their ability to do the same job in 2014, and both reports were reviewed by this board. Some were and some were not read, and they had required safety items to be performed to our district schools, and they were ignored for those years. And not only did they not do the required safety items in those 3 years that were available to them, but the fund balance was then consumed on non-safety items for our students. And at that time, in both those meetings, in the 2011 and the 2014 study, they had a task force that included individuals within this community that said to keep those local, safe, debt-free elementary schools open that attracts people to the community, not a center. Thank you.
Mr. Bradley, if you don't have specifics on what was repaired and what was not done.
I do. They were listed in the report.
I would like to actually see them.
Lori, why did you vote on something you didn't read yet?
I've seen it. I've seen most of the feasibility. I have seen it, David. I have seen it.
Did you pass something you didn't read yet?
I'm not answering questions, Dave.
Okay. Larry,
No comment.
why did you pass something?
No
you
comment,
didn't
Mr. Bradley. No comment.
Because I was the principal
You
for
can- you can-
many years.
I agree. You can download them.
And I know BHA is having issues with Mahoney. I know East Penn has issues with the Schleikers being able to build. So let's talk about the schools and what the real issues were, which the board did not want to address. And I am
But they had-
I'm not getting a debate with you.
But you can find information that I got because it's published on the district website. 2011, there was a report with required repairs, safety, and then 2014, there's a report for required repair, safety, and they are identical. They were not performed.
We were past.
Yeah, I've been sitting here for an hour and a half at another meeting, 2 hours, and have heard little discussion on how we're gonna close the gap, how much we need to make sure the bills are paid as far as pushing, because when the monies come in, you have bills that are paid all year long, but your tax money comes in at a certain time of year. So what is that fund balance that we need for cash flow, and how are we gonna close the gap moving
But
forward?
Mr. Karas, even you would admit that without the detailed report from our business manager, it would be premature to assign information without data. I mean, you have to have some.
How do you suggest closing the gap?
By looking at the data first.
Expenses or increased taxes?
Or looking at the data and removing this discrepancy that was discovered, that after discussing it with the
We've
past
already
business
been through
manager,
that, it's been explained.
You don't know
How
that
are you gonna do it?
you did not verify that it is missing. And
There's
that
nothing missing, it was an accounting.
it was not.
The issue.
So the point is, you do not verify it. I verify that it's not missing. Thank you.
We, at this point, is there any other comments from the public?
I have a question. Is the budget, there was a thing in the Times News saying the budget is available here. Is the budget going to be available online?
I have to double check to see if that is.
We can scan the current proposed up on the website.
Okay, just be easier than,
To take advantage of the opportunity of our citizens to help us with this problem, since it's their pockets that this board is trying to take the money from if they make a mistake, can we please publish that detailed report as well, Patricia? Onto the web? Thank you. Manages that, why do we need the broker? Why can't we just let our employees do this job? What's your answer, Tim?
There's a lot involved in that. There's an RFP, there was a process that was proposed, and there was no wording to that RFP.
But it was shortchanged. I mean, they only did a first interview.
Mr. Brownlee, I'd like to mention too that Mr. Fike was the one who suggested we do the RFP. Just so you know, he was also the one who suggested we didn't do the second round because of time savings. Again, I'm not blaming him, but since he's the one you trust explicitly, I'd just like you to know that it was his plan, not my plan.
And the board is the one that makes the final decision. So when you rubber stamp his plan, you are doing nothing more than abdicating your responsibility to one of your employees instead of doing your duty as a board member. And the original plan was to do both sets of that. And if they would have done the interview set and the final set, you would not be in the position you're in today. You kicked it down the road, and here we are.
And you had left that last meeting early, ran out while we started discussion on those providers.
I actually walked out because the discussion was inappropriate to even have because you didn't have the information. I specified that. We made a video, right, my opinion, we made a video showing you that behind door number 1, 2, and 3 is what you were doing and you never looked behind the doors. And you didn't have any information about what was behind those doors. And the door that was missing, was to not even incur the responsibility of a broker and to do it in-house, which other districts have done, and saves them a fortune, and keeps it local so the transparency can be held so you do not have a situation where people are moving chess pieces without knowing where they're going, sir. So there's a proposal that the property tax rebate can occur for individuals within the district that allows for a 30% rebate of their taxes. Did we put this proposal into our proposed budget going forward? And are we going to even consider giving those people this 30% tax break that they're doing in other districts?
We did not put that into place. And you are right, they do that at other districts. Mostly it's done at districts that have a much larger commercial tax base that they can use to offset the residential taxes. Unfortunately, in our district, we are a veteran community. We do not have the large commercial tax base that would allow us to do that.